I'm just going to recap on some of the topics, some of the things that come up in our parallel session on health, and we wanted to include, I suppose, an aspect of the conference on a social policy area, and TASC has recently completed work in the area of health, and what we're trying to do is link economics and social policy. So we've done work on health, so this is our first outing in that regard. And what was very interesting, what came up in the discussion on health, is that what's happening with health is the human face of what's happening as a result of the choices and the policies that are being pursued by the government. And in particular, a phrase that I liked was the political economy of cuts. And the political economy of cuts are cuts that are spread out over a long period of time. They're chipping away at various aspects of not just health, education, social protection, and they're targeting those who are least likely to make a fuss. So there was a lot of discussion about mental health, carers. They seem to be the front line of the impact of the cuts that are happening in health. And as we know, in education, cuts to social, the SNAs are an example of cuts in health. So the title of this afternoon's session was an equal recovery ? Well, the response to the crisis and how we respond to the crisis will determine whether we have an equal recovery or not, and the signs aren't good, unfortunately. And I suppose, in terms of what the evidence that was put out in our session, was that the absolutely crucial role of social protection in acting as the safety net for people in times of crisis. So there were examples of how in Sweden, when they had their banking crisis in the 90s, that they, while unemployment shot up, their suicide levels continued to decline because they had the safety net in place, whereas a different scenario was the case in Spain. So that's just an example. And there was also recent work on Greece that was discussed in terms of increases in HIV rates, huge cuts to the number of doctors, and cuts to the spending in healthcare in general. And what was kind of scary was that some of the trends that they are starting to see in Greece are the same trends that were identified at during the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, which really effectively did a good job of destroying the cradle-to-grave welfare system. And I suppose at the end we were talking, there was a discussion about the bailouts and the austerity. Opportunities for whom? And to date, it's been opportunities to shrink the state, to cut back the size of the state, to socialise risk, and capitalism for the poor.
That's 3 minutes now, Sinead.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. No, I'm actually going to finish now with a quote in terms of, we talked about health, so I thought I'd finish with a quote from Stiglitz on who talks about health. Talks about what's happening in the economy in terms of health. So what he said was the prescriptions for what ails the global economy follows directly from the diagnosis. So we need our strong government expenditure aimed at facilitating a restructuring of the economy, promoting energy conservation and dealing with climate change, and reducing inequality and reforming the global financial system. So that's it in a nutshell. Thanks.